We do currently have a word cloud up on Slido, and Slido is something we're going to be using a little bit off and on throughout today. So feel free, once you open it, to go ahead and keep it open. You can join, if you haven't used Slido, either going to their website, slido.com, and entering in the code, or you can use your phone and take a picture of the QR code and it will take you directly to our poll today. And if you can't get Slido to work, you can also feel free just to type into chat and provide your responses there.
I love it. There's a response that says, happy, proud, unsure. Because it is an accomplishment to prepare and present a training. It's a lot of work.
We have quite a few people who feel unsure about the closing, because that's definitely a common with word clouds. The more people who say the same thing, then the bigger that word gets. So that's one reason I also kind of like word clouds. But all right, well, I don't think anyone else is actively typing, so we are going to go ahead and move forward. One other thing we're also going to do today is oh, we did well. All right, and so rushed and unsure. So that's going to be a perfect segue into what we're going to be covering today. We are also going to do a quick annotate. So this is just a reminder of how you can annotate. If you are on your computers, again, you should see you are viewing whoever's screen, which would be mine today, Bethany. There is a view options tab that you should be able to click. Once you click it down, then you should see an annotate. Once you click annotate, then this is a bar that should show up to where you have multiple options. And today, I think we actually switched it to where we're mainly going to be using the stamp, but you can also do text and other things. If you're on your phone, we have learned that on your screen, there should be a little pen. If you click the pen, then this is your annotate options that will pop up. So you can either use a pen or an arrow, color, erase, or save. And we got a couple people who are playing around and got a drawing on there. So we'll go ahead and move over to there we go. I can get mine to pop up. So we're going to do a kind of just, it's not an official bingo game, but closing bad habits, using the annotate, one of the stamps or marking. Click on any of the things that you feel like you have seen either from other trainers or that you have experienced even as doing your own trainings as a trainer. All annotations are going to be anonymous, so your names will not pop up with whatever you mark. So we're not going to know. Well, they're supposed to be anonymous. There we go. Let's try that again. I had checked it before we got people in here and it was still set, but apparently I have to reset it.
I love the different colors people are picking.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting quite a few, not enough time, rush through it. No real summary activity. Actually, we're kind of getting them across the board. Okay, I'm gonna give this just a moment or two more. Okay. Then we're going to move right back into one other Slido question. Now, this is one that will just, instead of being a word cloud, your answers will just continuously fall one right under another, kind of like within a chat. So what do your learners gain from the closing? And this is from your perspective as a trainer in your own trainings. What do you feel like learners gain from your closings? Summary of content. So I'm saying a lot of summaries, wrap-ups, reiterates the objectives of the training. Reviews, key takeaways, content.
I'm seeing some how to apply and ideas to take forward too.
Okay.
And that's also in the chat.
Good. All right, so that's kind of what we're going to be also readdressing and kind of going into more detail today. So this is kind of our roadmap for today. We're going to discuss a little bit about closing basics, delve into some key elements, and then also talk about some summary and action at the to wrap it all up. So first, think about why closings are important. And I feel like we've already really addressed a lot of this today, but we're also going to hear why closings are important.
So a lot of trainers don't close, they run out of time. Whoop, that's all we have time for. Thanks for coming. Please be sure to fill out your evaluation form. Because if people don't think about how they're going to use what they've learned in the class, they're not going to get a chance to think about when they get back to the job.
So again, a lot of what you guys have already been saying today, as far as there's a lot of trainers who, oops, they just ran out of that time and then they rush through, or they don't provide that chance to review things, review content, or make sure the learners have grasped what you guys have already covered in the training. There is a full video that was a Bob Pike clip that I got off of one of his full videos off of YouTube. So the link here is just a link to his full video, but really for what we were covering today, that little short clip was what we were kind of focusing on, as far as it really is important to have a closing. All right, so again, going back to using annotate. This is just a quick little quiz, and make sure that it hides. Okay, it does hide the name of annotators again. So again, anonymous little quiz. When you're looking at, sorry, Sharon.
That's okay. You got it.
When you're looking at doing your closing, what is the correct amount of time percentage of your whole training that you should be planning for your closing?
And if folks are having trouble using annotate, feel free to put your answer in the chat. I'm impressed that people are so good at using annotate. Let's see what we're seeing. Looks like most of the answers have come in, and they're kind of all over the board. So, oh, saw some hearts at 20 to 25. I see a lot of 15 to 20. All right. Well, the answer is your closing should be 20 to 25% of your training time. And that is a healthy percentage of your training that occurs after the content portion. And we saw in the bad habits bingo that you filled out that often being rushed or not having time for some of the elements can be a bad habit. When you registered and filled out the needs assessment, many of you also said that feeling too rushed and running out of time was an issue for you in your closing. So using this 20 to 25% guideline when you're planning can really make sure you have enough time and stay on track. Well, next we're going to briefly look at the key components that should be a part of your closing. And we are going to discuss all but the Q&A and the housekeeping. We're going to discuss everything else in the next section. So I'm just going to go through it fairly quickly on this slide. But starting with the top left, your closing section should have time for a final question and answer section. And this is true even if there's been a lot of time during your training for your participants to ask questions. If you are using a parking lot, you can also make sure you've answered all those questions during this time. Then next is the evaluation, and that's something we know we need. And if you remember way back to FET, or if you were at last month's trainer connection, there are 4 levels of evaluation that we look at when we're evaluating training effectiveness. And levels 1 and 2 are what are gained from your in-session evaluation. So that is how your participants feel about the training and then what knowledge they gained. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then next is the summary. And this is a really important activity because it allows your learners to review and reinforce and kind of ties together everything that they've learned. Then coming down to the bottom left is the implementation plan. And as we saw in that video that we watched, the implementation plan is really important for them to plan for how they're going to use what they've learned from the training and apply it back in their workplace. And that's really the goal when we do trainings. And then in addition to the implementation plan, offering a short transfer of learning activity can help your learners remember the training. It can help them keep it kind of in the top of their mind in the weeks following the training, and it can lead to better retention. And then finally, you can signal that your training is over by closing with final housekeeping information. Was there anything on this list that surprised you? You can type in the chat or feel free to unmute. Looks like it's kind of a good review for everyone. Great. Well, then we'll move on. And in our next section, we're going to dive a little further into many of those key closing components that we looked at in the last slide. We're going to start with the summary, and that is the activity that allows your learners to review what they've gained from your training. So let's hear from you. And you can either unmute or type in the chat, or you can open up your annotate and click on the T for text and type a text box. What summary review activities do you use? Let's see what people. I see question, answer, and role playing. Role playing's great. Okay. Bingo, games. These are some good ones. Anything else anybody wants to share? A walkabout, questions and answers. Vicki, how do you do the walkabout? Tell us about that.
Excuse me, as a closing activity, each team them up with 1 or 2 other participants, and they go around the room and discuss what is listed on, that's displayed and listed, as a follow-up and a closure.
So that
for
has the
example,
benefit of movement, it sounds like.
yes, yes. They're always ready to move.
Absolutely. Thank you. I see Jeopardy, round robins. So some good ideas that people are using. Bingo, tic-tac-toe, questions and answers. Great, excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. And then, is it Janie? Is that how I say your name? Janie says, I usually have the participants create a plan to review and then have them select a speaker. That's a good idea too. Well, thank you for sharing, and we'll move on. Excellent. So on this next slide, this is some statements of summary experiences. So go ahead and open up your annotate and pick a stamp and put a stamp by any of these statements if you have either experienced them in summaries in trainings that you've attended or in your own trainings. Let's see what people are. And again, feel free, if you're having any issues with annotate, feel free to type into the chat. So we're seeing a lot of stamps on many of these. So no time. And we've talked about that a little bit. Board learner, and then learners, a lot of summary, not interactive. And those can really go together, especially, and Vicki says board learners, especially at the end of a training session, people are tired, the energy level can be a little low. And I am seeing some stamps by summary lecture as well. And we'll talk a little more about that, but a lecture can be a very effective training method, but sometimes, especially at the end of the training, there might be some other options for your summary that are a little more interactive. And then the class size creates problems. In what way? What do you see when you're talking about your class, when you're looking at your class sizes? That was a comment by Janie. Too many participants for certain activities. And sometimes it can be hard to plan because you don't really know. You might know who's signed up, but you don't know how many are going to come. So at great point. Yeah. And then I see the technical problems, and boy, that happens to all of us. The best we can do is try to practice and try to have a backup if you can. And then I see a couple stamps on same activity every time. So one thing that we sometimes do as trainers is we find training methods that work for us, that we're comfortable with, that we really like. And there's nothing wrong with that again, but if you are going to plan your training and you're like, I can predict exactly what I'm going to do in each session, then it might be a good idea to switch it up and try something different. And that might also give you better engagement. So does anybody have anything they want to comment on when they're looking at this list? Participants won't engage. That can definitely be a challenge, especially at the end. Does anyone have any strategies if you have participants that won't engage? Change up the scene. That's a good one.
Wait long enough, eventually someone will, because they want to move on too. I actually watched a trainer do that this weekend. Nobody was volunteering to start with, and they just waited a little longer, and eventually they started jumping in.
Yeah, the power of silence. It's hard as a trainer to allow that silence, but it can really help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes there's one or two people that are participating, and so we can use them as a springboard. And Carla says, yeah, the participants just want to leave. So it definitely can be a challenge. That's a great suggestion, Kathy. Incentivize answers little. I've seen trainers give out even little prizes, sometimes can be motivating for people. All right, well, thank you. Well, we will move on. This was great input. So in the previous slide, one of the potential watchouts that we talked about was overusing lecture as a summary activity. And again, there's nothing wrong with lectures. They can be really helpful training methods, but sometimes, particularly towards the end of your training, there are other methods that will result in better engagement. So these are some options depending on your the delivery method. These are some options you could use to spice things up. So first, for trainings where there are specific steps or tasks, you may use a summary activity that's a demonstration followed by a debrief. And many of you have probably experienced this when you've taken CPR training. For a face-to-face session, you can use learning stations to review key activities, kind of like Vicki mentioned. It has the benefit of some movement and also allowing some hands-on learning for those people that really respond to that learning style. For example, if you are doing a preschool training on enhancing language in a preschool classroom, you might do one learning station on expanding vocabulary and then have your learners rotate to another learning station on using open-ended questions. Case studies are an option, and they can work virtually or in person, and they also allow your learners to practice applying what they've learned from the training. And then finally, games. And we heard on the previous screen that many of you do use games. They can be a really good option to get some quick engagement, get the energy level back up, and they also have the benefit of working in a variety of delivery formats. Well, next we are going to take some time to learn from each other and go into breakout rooms. And we're going to use the training scenario that is on this screen. And in your breakout group, you will discuss what are possible summary activities that you might use for this scenario. And we purposely picked one that's pretty common and pretty flexible. So there's no one right answer. There's a lot of summary activities that could be very appropriate. You can also pick what delivery method you're using when you're in your group, because a face-to-face training versus a live virtual training, you may pick a different strategy. So when you get to your breakout groups, if someone would wait long enough, give silence, if someone would volunteer to take notes and then report back to the group when we return, that would be very helpful. And once we get you to your groups, we will share this screen, so you'll be able to see the scenario. And Bethany, how long are we going to send them for?
That's what I was gonna double check before I sent them.
I think 6 minutes is what we said.
Okay. And if you guys get to where you think of an answer really, really quickly, and you have someone willing to report out, you will be able to come back and join us back in the main room. So don't feel like you have to take all 6 minutes, but we want to give you plenty of time to also discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and bump people over now.
Awesome.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. It looks like, I think everybody's back. Hopefully there was some good conversation. So how about group one, which is Carla, Donna, Carla, Lisette, and Rebecca? Is there somebody that would report out from group one?
Hey, oh, there I am. I keep talking and I'm mute. We had a couple different things. One, we had a bingo game, and we've had some video and skits, but I think several of us had talked about like role play, different scenarios that happen in the classroom and behaviors and how you would handle that in a positive way. We had one, another Carla was in the group. She kind of had one where they actually did a behavioral plan on a couple kids that they had, I guess teachers had in the group. So they actually created a behavior plan. And then we had one that that she would ask the participants, what is one thing that you learned that you'll implement back into your group, and they write it down. And that wasn't a face-to-face, so that was more of a, we had several different ones, but a lot of it was role play and implementing that way scenarios.
A lot of great ideas. Thank you. And role playing can be so effective, especially if you give them each a little bit of information on their roles. Some people just can love to, I don't want to say ham it up, but that adds a little humor as well. So thank you. All right, how about group two? That was Carrie, Jessica, Laura, Sherry, and Tevis.
I can share out. So we talked about also role play. So, and including a guessing component. So having teams role play a certain discipline or different strategy, and then the rest of the groups have to guess what that strategy is to summarize the concepts. We talked about mix and match cards where you have the skills on one card and their definition on another, and whatever team can match them the quickest. We talked about how we've trained a lot of participants that are competitive. So a lot of the things we came up with are more game related or challenge related. So someone else mentioned family feud games, and participants have to name the top strategy for certain situations or scenarios. Of course, we would include prizes for those who won, the teams that won. And then last, someone mentioned crossword puzzles for memory.
Oh, that's fun. Those are some fun ideas. Would you do the crossword puzzles in teams, or how would you envision doing that?
Good question. We didn't really talk about it in detail. So if somebody else wants to speak from the group, they're more than welcome to.
I would say you could do it either. You could probably do it either. In the past, I've just like done them per table, and like the table work to try to solve, like 10 different key words with the definitions from the training.
Mm-hmm. Kind of create some fun, and they get to work together a little bit. And thank you for sharing. And I love the when you mentioned that people like to be competitive, because I agree, especially when you're able to put them in teams. It can be amazing how much fun people have with that.
Amen.
Great. Well, thank you. How about our group three?
Was that me? I think so. Kathy and
Kathy, Paula,
yeah.
Vicki, yep.
Okay. We had 2 or 3 that maybe have not quite been mentioned. 2 of them are really could be face-to-face or, virtual, and then one would just have to be face-to-face. But the virtual ones would be, find a video clip of some children that are, and then you can find them online. Just find a video clip of a problem about to happen, and then the small groups can kind of brainstorm a list of what they would do to either prevent that or to deal with it. And the other one is similar, but it's like a written scenario, like this is happening. You can give a little bit more information that way. Just here's the scenario, and how would you using what you learned today, what strategies would you implement? And then the last one would need to be probably face-to-face. I don't know that you could do this video, but it's very creative and hands-on. You would have small groups and pieces like paper or other items, and ask them to build a house, and each part of the house is labeled. So the most important thing, would be, the roof or the foundation, and then all the other things would go together to build this sturdy house of social and emotional support. So that seemed like it was really a good creative activity that would get people up out of their seats and talking and discussing, what is most important, and very embedded in all the things that you do.
That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah. Thank you. And great point on the videos too, particularly because you could use those for an on-demand training or a live webinar. Excellent. Well, thank you all. Such creative suggestions. We have some very experienced trainers here. Before we move on, is there anything that anybody else wants to add from your discussion on summary activities? All right, well, thank you so much. And I will turn things back over to Bethany. Bethany, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. We're going to kind of next move into implementation plans. Again, this can be another component of your closing or of your training, but especially kind of looking at those next steps as far as what do you want them to take back? What are their goals they're going to be setting, and who's going to be responsible for what? And I may have just answered this, but kind of looking at, again, another open-ended question. Why is implementation plan or planning important between the trainer and the trainee? And again, this is another Slido, or again, if you want to just type into chat, either way works for us as well. Accountability. How to then use the information in the real world environment. Best practice assessment. Make sure it gets done. Knowledge is useless without the ability to utilize it.
That is a great quote, whoever contributed that, because it's so true.
And let's see, to allow the training to be accessible and usable. You also want the participants to be able to leave with new strategies. Yep, and Janie also said you can use it for a check of understanding and shows that everything has been planned intentionally as well. Great responses. Thank you. We are going to share just a few examples, and these are not necessarily specific to just early childhood, but a couple examples that we kind of looked at and pulled from. And we also are going to drop in the chat box the document itself. So if you can't read everything on the screen, that's fine as well. We just wanted to at least give a snapshot. But again, like we said, just doing even a simple implementation plan form, it just allows people to then just be able to write down, okay, what are their goals? What are the action steps they're going to then take when they get back into their room or back into their workplace? What resources and materials are needed in order for them to meet these goals? what is the timeline? How are they going to know when their goal has been met? And then also be able to then document when that action step has been completed. A lot of implementation plans may also include who's responsible for what, or who they also need additional support from maybe. So if they need something specifically from like their center manager or director, then that could be something noted on here. So then that way that can be communicated back within their environment as well. And then another one we had as an example, this one could easily be rearranged for different contents. And this is one I know it's gonna be tough to read on your screen, but Sharon did put it in chat as well. Pretty much just being able, as they're going through the training, to be able to list things, changes they want to make into their environment. And again, it's got a spot for steps and timeframes to use to reach the goals, changes within different interest centers. So there could be a box for how do they want to make changes to separate quiet and noisy areas, the changes in the classroom as a whole, or ways to address to ensure protective play in the classroom. So again, this can be very specific to what the content is and covering everything as well. But it's just a different format and a different way to kind of look at it, but it would still be a totally insignificant and implementation plan. And thank you, Sharon, clarify, you can create a box for each training objective. So that way they can go back and figure out, okay, this was the training objective. Here's some notes as far as how I want to then implement this into my own center or my own room. Do any of the rest of you, and again, you can feel free to unmute or just drop in the chat. Do any of the rest of you have any other types of implementation plans that you use within your trainings? Kathy?
I'll go. I can't say they really loved it, but we had at one time a bunch of second steps kits, which is a big, thing to implement. So we had done the training on that, and I even offered an extra hour of training if they would go and teach the first unit and have a picture or a video or anything just kind of showing while they were implementing that particular kit, so that we knew it was being used. So I would say maybe 50%, really got into it and started using it, which is not great, but I just really wanted to try that to see if we could get a little bit better implementation and use of it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Janie says she uses lesson plans. Okay, well, if you think of any others, feel free to throw it in chat. Otherwise, we are going to a little bit more dively next into transfer of learning activities.
Yes, and I will quickly go through those because I'm watching our time and we want to get you out by 3. So a transfer of learning activity is really anything that demonstrates or assists your learners in taking what they've gotten from your training and applying it to the workplace. So the implementation plan that Bethany just took you through, making sure to have time to do that is a really important start because that allows them to set goals. In addition, it can really help with engagement and retention to offer an additional short, fun, creative transfer of learning activity that allows them to keep what they've learned from the training top of mind when they return to their workplace. And typically, transfer of learning activities support your trainees in 3 different areas. It can be practice and learning, motivation, just giving them those little reminders, and or support and coaching. So we're going to look at a few examples very quickly, but there are lots of fun, creative things you might do. Okay, so this example is called Pick a Quote. So what your learners would do is they would pick a quote that relates to either an improvement goal they're setting or something that they've learned from the training, and post it back in their classroom or workplace as a reminder. And if you're doing a face-to-face training, you could print some quotes out and have them available for them to select, and then they could maybe share out why they picked what they did. If it's a virtual training, you could give them a PDF, and if they wanted, they could either print it out or they could create a screensaver with it. And we will drop this in the chat as well so that you can have a copy of this. And then another idea is called a bright idea chart. And what you can do is give each trainee one of these along with some colored Post-it notes. And as they're going through the training, encourage them, if they have an aha moment or something that is really meaningful to them, write it on the Post-it note, put it on the bright idea chart, and then post that back in their workplace when they return. And it'll help them remember it, it'll keep it top of mind. If you are in a virtual training, you could provide them with the PDF and they could either print it out or fill it in online. And then another idea, depending on your training audience, this is called Letter to Future Me. And what you do is have the trainees, after they've done their implementation plan, they write a very short letter to their future self, talking about what they will have accomplished in 2 weeks, what goal they've met, what steps they may have taken, and how they'll feel about it. And these letters can be as funny or as serious as you would like, but then the trainer will collect the letters, and in 2 weeks, you can scan them and email them back to your participants. And you can also provide some follow-up resources that relate to the goals they've set. So there are lots and lots of other ideas as well, reminders and trackers. We talked about a lot of visual reminders for some respondents, some trainees, especially if they are trying to implement a new behavior. Giving them a little sticker chart with some bright stickers can be a fun way to track how often they're doing that behavior. Let's say they want to ask more open-ended questions, so they could use a little sticker chart. And then we also mentioned that transfer of learning activities can relate to peer support. So if you have a teaching team that are teaching teams or in your training, maybe they would agree to be accountability partners and follow up with each other in 2 weeks. You can also use technology, such group whiteboards, such as Jamboard or Padlet, to allow your trainees to post updates and suggestions and provide each other with peer support in the weeks following the training. Does anybody have any other transfer of learning activities that they've learned, that they've used, that they would recommend? All right, well, in the interest of time, I am going to move on because I see we've got 11 minutes. So very quickly, we're going to touch base on the evaluation. We know we need to have a session evaluation. It helps us as trainers get feedback that we can use to improve our trainings and plan for our upcoming trainings. We often hear that the evaluations aren't as helpful as we would like because the respondents just want to get out of there. So they fill them out quickly. They don't put a lot of thought into them. So one suggestion that can really help is make sure that the evaluation is not the last thing that your learners do in your training. You can move that up to earlier in your closing. For example, it could be after your summary activity, but before the implementation plan and transfer of learning activity. The other thing that can help is to make content-specific evaluations. That level 2 evaluation is what have they learned? And so if you are asking them questions that relate directly to the training objectives rather than just generic questions, that can also get you more engaged feedback on your evaluation. Now I'm going to turn things back over to Bethany. Slido is free. And you can, in any event, you can do 3 polls and you can do a quiz with unlimited questions. So that's just something, thank you, Kathy, don't stress, but that's just something to keep in mind. Slido is a really fun tool. There's a lot you can do with it.
But in the sake of time, I think we're just going to skip it because I cannot get it to work. I was afraid of that. And things like this, that's where I have
Thank you,
issues
Vicki.
with. So we're just going to skip those and we will share those. And now I've lost Zoom. So sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, Murphy's Law for sure, Janie.
And it's always even more annoying, I feel like, when you've actually practiced it and you've made it work and then you come back and it still doesn't work properly. And it's like, okay. So anyways, do you guys have any quick questions or answers for us, that anything that we've covered thus far that you still have any lingering questions about?
Thank you, Carla. It's great.
Okay. To
Well,
kind of wrap this up, Sharon is going to lead us in a chat waterfall.
Yep, this will be the very last thing we do. And this is another one. We practiced it, we had it, it looked really good. But if you can, write down quickly one thing you plan to implement from this session, but don't hit enter yet. And then we're going to start the timer, and after 30 seconds, we'll hit enter together and we'll have a waterfall of responses. So go ahead and start typing, and Bethany, you can hit that start button.
It is counting down, we just can't see it.
Yep. All right, well, if you haven't hit enter, I think we're about counted down. Go ahead and hit enter and let's see what we get. Boy, there is a lot of people have a lot of ideas. So the implementation plan is big, the Slido, some of the transfer of learning activities. That's excellent. And Paula says extend time on the closers. Yeah, that it seems like that was a surprise that I know I have to work hard to keep my content section the right length so that I have enough time to really wrap things up with my closing. So wonderful. Thank you all very much. And this timer, by the way, is a free timer called Break Time. And you can put it in PowerPoint, but it's also really great if you want to just put a timer up on the screen before your session starts or to show how long your breaks are. It's called Break Time, and it's a really good option.
Are you saying, what are you saying, break time?
Break Time. I will type it into chat. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. And then next, I'm going to turn it over to Glenna, and she's going to talk about our next Trainers Connection.
Yes, next month on the 27th at 2 o'clock, we're going to let the games begin. We're going to review games you may have seen in face-to-face trainings, and we're going to adapt them for online. Sometimes everything changes in the blink of an eye. You may think you're going face-to-face, and then something like COVID happens and you're online. So we're going to try to give you some games for your trainer toolbox so that if you have to change in a few seconds, a few minutes, or a day, that you will have some games you can implement that will go for either virtual or face-to-face, so you're not left hanging. I hope to see you all there.
And we will go ahead and drop that link, registration link, into chat as well. You will at a later date be also getting an email from your training coach, just like you normally do. But since you're here today, we wanted to go ahead and be sharing the information. Thank you guys very much for being with us today. We appreciate it, even all the glitches and all. If you do have any follow-up questions, as always, reach out to your individual training coach, or you can also reach out to Sharon or myself if you have any specific questions as well. But thank you for your patience today, your great participation, and for being here. We greatly appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to learn from you all. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine if you've got it.